Okay, I'm going to call the committee of the whole meeting for Monday, June 21st, 2021 to order. Roll call, please.
Mayor Gaffino.
Here.
Trustee Carroll.
Here.
Trustee Curtis. Here. Trustee Gately.
Here.
Trustee Nedved.
Here.
Trustee Salazar. Here.
Okay, thank you. Audience comments. Nothing. Okay, thank you. Trustee comments. Okay, discussion item 1. Steve.
Thank you, Mayor. Item number 1 on the agenda tonight is the proposed warehouse development off of Fairview. Mike is going to give a presentation, but basically tonight is about their traffic plan. And what we're looking to do is, the purpose of this is to decide whether or not the board is comfortable with the traffic plan as laid out. Before they move forward with any other engineering or the project as a whole, they'd like to make sure you're comfortable with the traffic first.
I'll go ahead and take it from here. I'm just going to go through some points, and then if the developer is on the Zoom call, allow them to speak to the traffic plan. Just want to go over for notes though, but on March 15, 2021, the committee of the whole discussed the concept development plans. It's the 26 acres located directly to the west of the Tinseltown property between Sullivan Road and Smoke Tree Plaza. At that point in time, we discussed some of the elements of the site plan itself. A lot of the concern was raised around the area traffic. More or less, how much traffic is the site going to generate, where the truck's going to go in and out of, which the information here tonight would attempt to address a lot of those concerns. So the developer originally went out and hired the services of KLOA to perform a preliminary traffic plan, which was included in the actual packet, and which Dave has up on the screen right now. The intent of it was to basically alleviate, obviously some of the board concerns and address them specifically. So the plan of itself went out, it estimated traffic generated by the development. It reviewed the proposed access and circulation system, and a review of the truck routes to and from the development. According to the truck route exhibit, inbound truck traffic would enter the site from the south onto Fairview Drive via Sullivan Road and exit to the north onto Smoke Tree Plaza. Passenger vehicles would actually take access from either entrance off of Smoke Tree or Fairview via Sullivan. The actual Fairview Drive right now is unutilized village right-of-way, which would have to be vacated at some point. That would actually just be a detail that would be addressed at a different time. The city of Aurora would have to also be contacted as well. We do have an IGA where there are different rights of way that we monitor they monitor Sullivan Road and have access agreements with Sullivan Road. We take Mitchell Road. So we've actually already spoken with the developer and would have to facilitate discussions with the city of Aurora whether or not they would have to approve some entry points off of Sullivan Road there. So I've said a few points. If the developer, I don't know if he's on the Zoom call right now, if they want to add anything to the discussion. Yes.
Hey, Mike, thank you for that presentation. This is Ben Harris with Present Property Group. Again, to echo what staff has said, it's really seeking approval from Cal tonight that the Cal is acceptable of the access pattern that we are showcasing here, where trucks and cars would enter the site via Sullivan Road onto Fairview Drive. And then trucks would exit the site from Fairview Drive on a Smoke Tree Lane. Cars would enter and exit both ingress, egress points. But really, for us to move forward and have my capital partner move forward, is making sure that we had okay from the village that that this is acceptable. The reason why we're here tonight again is, when I met in March 15th, I stated that trucks would enter and exit the site via Smoke Tree Lane. And after further investigation of that and talking to capital groups, that was not acceptable. And additionally, the trucks had some difficulty making the right turn from Lincoln Way on the Smoke Tree Plaza. So here, this exhibit is a great job of showing the overall flow of the site. And here I am this evening just to make sure that the village of North Aurora is acceptable of this pattern for me to keep moving forward.
Yeah, Dave, if you don't mind, we had that one that you had that previous slide that showed the Lovedale Lane access right in front of Tinseltown. Just that exhibit there. And I believe, yeah, that one right there. Thank you. Some of the trustees had, questioned some of the truck movement in that area. So again, everything they had done here was, it's not a full-blown traffic report, but it was an attempt to address the specific questions that the board raised during the last committee of the whole meeting. We have anticipated weekday traffic counts, the actual geometrics there. We're going to need to take a little closer look at Fairview and how that works with Aurora with regards to that access. So that would be with the next step. But I think we're just trying to get general consensus on the actual high level traffic portion in order to kind of move the development a little forward inch by inch to get closer to some entitlement process with the Plan Commission, just so they have a level of comfort that the board is understanding of what the traffic pattern looks like in order to move forward. It's fine.
Todd?
You guys discussed this before I was on the board, obviously. Did the original plan have the trucks, and I'm sorry if this is already stated, I couldn't hear very well, but did the original plan have the trucks coming in at Tinseltown as well, in and out?
Yeah, the concept has always been that it would come through a smoke tree lane to some extent. We just needed to take a little bit closer look at that point in time, Trustee Nedved, they were just concerned with how that area would sort of function geometrically. That's why they provide the exhibit here. I think it was more or less more of a visual. It was hard to visualize at that point in time what it would look like. There is sort of this teardrop configuration. If you look where that truck is on the top part of the screen, how the village had worked through the improvement of Smoke Tree Lane to bring traffic a little bit to the west or to the left in order to make that movement to the east again, as opposed to having, and there is a mountable curb right there in the middle where it says Smoke Tree Plaza. So trucks can make that move. And I believe there was a mention in here that they did observe trucks going over the mountable curb at that point. But I think the point was just to visualize what that area would look like with truck traffic. And it is actually utilized right now by Dark Container back there. I think there being one of the reasons why we had done some geometric improvements in that area to the intersection.
All right, so I guess to clear up what I'm wondering is, so Fairview, the entrance on Fairview is a new concept, is that correct?
I believe that was discussed at one point in time. We were not 100%. There have been talks about taking traffic potentially to the west to Evergreen. So at that point in time, it was just a very high level discussion regarding traffic, nothing really specific.
Okay.
What's nice about that though, is if you look at Sullivan Road, there's the roundabout there. So what happens with that traffic movement heading westbound on Sullivan Road is the entrance onto Fairview actually, hopefully with some geometric improvements, would get you into the property without getting near the roundabout. That was one of the concerns that I had, was taking trucks through, which I think does happen through observance, which I think is mentioned in the report. But that was one of the concerns that I had too, was how did that area function?
That's exactly my question. I travel that road throughout the day quite a bit, and it could get a little tight up there at times. So that would be my only concern.
Yeah, the semis just drive right over that roundabout.
Yep.
They can't make that.
Yeah, exactly.
Mark? No.
I'm okay with the concept. I like it better going through Fairview that addresses. I still am a little concerned about them coming out of Smoke Tree, especially if there's movies going on or something. There's going to be a lot more passenger cars coming in and out of there. But I'm generally okay with the concept.
Okay, thanks, Laura.
Good.
Carolyn?
The only question I had is that that's such a short intersection between the light and where you get on the expressway, and it's generally congested during certainly the morning hours. I mean, what is your feeling about how that's going to overall impact? And is it just going to sort of create a frustrating traffic jam there at certain times of the day, or do you feel what impact do you feel it's really going to have?
In the local area, you can look at on one of the, if you don't mind, I think there's the anticipated the traffic volumes. It's one of the slides. There's a table. I think it's on the second page of the plan.
Yeah, table 1.
Yeah, that just kind of shows some of the area traffic indicators. see if we get to that. I don't know, Ben, too, if you're online, if you want to speak to just
Yeah,
the observance.
So a couple comments here, and I'm just gonna speak freely here if that's okay. Is the dark containers, the way that they utilize their traffic typically is they'll take Sullivan to Evergreen, and Evergreen up to their facility, and then Smoke Tree out. I have seen, I've sat and watched trucks both enter on Smoke Tree and exit off Smoke Tree on the Lincoln Way. So one of the board trustees had concerns about trucks blocking passenger vehicles entering into Tinseltown movie theater. At times, trucks would stop at the stop sign. At times, trucks did block that intersection. But overall, it seemed like the traffic flow really, it was kind of two ships passing the night, essentially, where the truck traffic was during the day and the weekdays, and then the car traffic for movie theaters was at night or weekends. So that didn't seem to be too much of an issue. The trucks making a turn on the Smoke Tree definitely swung in and went into the far left lane, and that's where it generated concerns for me. It touched upon some of the concerns from one of the trustees, and so that's why we propose trucks entering on a Fairview Drive. When speaking with Mike originally back in March, or actually in late January, there was he made it crystal clear to me that the village does not want trucks coming from Fairview to on the Sullivan to leave the site. I did lose some interest in capital partners because of that restriction. There are still a few left, and since I'm here tonight and I have everyone in the room, is there any interest or to allow trucks exit back on the Sullivan, or is that an absolute no? I figured I'd ask that question since everyone's in. If it's an absolute no, that's completely fine, and we'll make sure we have the restrictions in place with signage to tell trucks that they cannot go past a certain point out on the Sullivan. But I do have that question for you, and I can tell you I've spent a number of hours in my car washing trucks to make sure that this is okay and talking to capital groups. And so I really appreciate your time tonight, and I don't mean to be talking in circles here, but it's something that I really want to tackle tonight. Make sure we're all on the same page as I move forward to spend quite a bit of money on the entitlement process.
Yeah, if I could, please, I think I'll go back to Trustee Salazar's question regarding, you can see here, the peak flow of morning and evening truck and passenger vehicle traffic. I think one of the narratives and some of the discussions we've had with the developer was that I think the goal is to target more office industrial as opposed to straight logistic warehousing, where they're going to have a number of suites involved. So it's not going to be just a straight warehouse distribution center, but they do intend on having multiple tenants within the building that would be reliant upon higher employment counts. So you would potentially have more passenger vehicles and less trucks in that area. I think what Mr. Harris was asking the board, and I apologize, Ben, it didn't come in very clear, but you were asking about the ability to take trucks back onto Sullivan Road, going southbound through the site back to Sullivan Road. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mike. I mean, I figured, hey, might as well as ask tonight. A trustee did just bring that up. They had concerns, and guys, I apologize. I'm in this apartment complex. It's kind of loud, so I apologize for that. But I did want to, ask that question and get feedback tonight. And additionally to your comment, Mike, about trucks and cars and overall concept of the site, if you look at our traffic truck volume compared to the Opus development, I believe we're about a third of that, and we're going to have a higher car count. So again, it's more tailored towards higher office, less distribution, but I do think just we need to make sure that I'm on the same page with the Village of North Aurora that we're collectively in agreement of how we want the truck flow access to operate on the site.
Yeah, some way to take a look at. Obviously, we've been working under the guise of the plan you submitted here. You know, I personally would want to take a look at anything involving Sullivan Lane, the number of trucks that are coming to and from Sullivan. The plan that's been presented tonight actually has a nice flow and pattern to it. If need be, the trucks can go through Sullivan to the north. But we'd have to take probably a closer look at anything involving taking trucks back onto Sullivan Road. Because I think the plan you presented tonight actually has a nice flow. And I don't know if that sounds like the board was amenable to what's been discussed. I'm not sure if they're going to be amenable to taking trucks back out onto Sullivan Road. Which,
No, and that's fair, Mike. I agree with you. Again, you know, I spent a number of hours out there, and when you watch the trucks for dark containers, they operate that same flow pattern, right? They come in on Sullivan to Evergreen, and they exit on Smoke Tree, and it seems to be a great flow pattern for this site. And I just thought I would ask that question. I'm not trying to, you know, push the envelope, so to speak here. But just I thought I'd ask that question just to confirm.
So can I just say something on trucks coming on 31? They've been doing it for so many years since I lived here. They seem to manage pretty well. I've seen huge semis come off Smoke Tree on a 31, and they're pretty good truck drivers. They understand they have to turn in, you know, distance. So I'm comfortable with that. I mean, looking at the, you know, table one, it doesn't appear to be that they're during peak time. And when I think peak time in and course out, but 11 trucks and maybe 54 coming in and out of there from peak time is I consider like 6 to 8 or 6 to 9. I think that, and that includes Sullivan Road too, right? Mike?
Or is it Sullivan Inn?
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that's just in and out general traffic.
I think, you know, just judging by what I've seen in that area throughout the years, trucks manage pretty well coming out onto 31. That's just that's what I see.
I also agree with that. That when I watched trucks sitting in the movie theater and trucks leaving Smoke Tree onto Lincoln Way, it was a pretty smooth process. You know, and typically it was one truck per stoplight, if that. You didn't really see them stack up that much. And please keep in mind that the truck volume will be significantly less than the truck volume for dark containers based on our configuration of the site plan.
I'm okay with the configuration that they have in this plan. I would be much more hesitant if the trucks were coming out on Sullivan trying to turn left to go south or go east to get back on 31.
I don't think they even pull out on Sullivan. Sullivan's a busy road, and trying to go east off of there, I don't think that happened. If you go west and you're driving over the center.
Yeah, before the roundabout, it would have been, physically impoable.
Right.
It was backing up onto Highland, but yeah, I would generally agree with that as well.
I think it's a good flow.
Todd?
I agree with the flow
No,
that's in the
I-
plan now. I think it works well.
Okay.
Great. Well, this is the feedback that I was seeking tonight and looking to obtain. And it gives me the comfort level I need to continue to move forward with this project and really start digging into the entitlement phase. Mike, is there I don't know, is there a vote that takes place tonight, or is it just more of the feedback from the committee?
No, we were just trying to garner feedback tonight, which, you know, it sounds like you have support for the traffic pattern that was proposed and the numbers that were given in the report. So the next step would obviously be through the entitlement process.
Great. Well, guys, everyone, thank you so much for your time tonight. Appreciate all the positive feedback, and we're still very excited for this development, excited with North Aurora, and I will hopefully be in touch soon with all the other documentation needed to get us fully entitled.
All right. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mike. Item 2, Steve?
Thank you. Item number 2 on the agenda tonight is the Opus Draft TIF incentive. As we've discussed previously, this is for the I-88 Corporate Park. This is the draft TIF incentive, and Mike is going to go through it. But before, the purpose of this is we are trying to get this to the July 19th meeting. So we want to make sure the board is comfortable with the terms as proposed.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. At the May 17, 2021 Cal meeting, the OPUS presented information pertaining to the incentive request involving tax increment finance funds for the OPUS IDA corporate park. According to OPUS's submittal, the project would require a total TIF reimbursement of roughly $3.9 million in order to make the project financially feasible. Per the incentive request, the project will be front funded by OPUS and the reimbursement amount will be paid back on an annual basis using only TIF funds generated from the project, not to exceed the $3.9 million as previously mentioned. While the OPUS IDA corporate park is 2 phases in of itself, the actual incentive request would only be tied to building B, which in this case is, I believe it's going to be lot 2, or actually the eastern portion of the now Valley Green Golf Course property. So again, the incentive request would only be tied to that particular building, not to buildings A, which would be located off Overland Drive, or building C, which would consist of the western portion of the golf course. At the May 17 Cal meeting, OPUS provided 2 different reimbursement scenarios, one at 90%, which was anticipated about a 9-year payback from the time of approval, and then 75%, which was anticipated about 10-year reimbursement, again, only from building B. There were a lot of good questions that came from the discussion, and the board seemingly was supportive at that time under the guise of the 75% reimbursement schedule, which is included in the draft report. We've been working with OPUS, their legal team, and our village legal counsel for the terms for the agreement. Everything that was discussed at that time, the 75%, building B, the $3.9 million, that's all been incorporated in this agreement. And we actually drafted an agreement itself, which is the Village North Aurora Tax Increment Financing Redevelopment Agreement for the IPUS 88 corporate project. So again, those terms are in there. This is going to be a working document. We don't have a first meeting in July, so the hopes is getting to some, more final consensus tonight with the plan we're presenting, bringing a final plan back in July for final approval, which would coincide with the actual Route 31 TIF district as well. OPUS is here tonight, a representative, but at this point in time, I think I'm going to hand it over to Attorney Drendel if he wants to bring up any legal aspects of the agreement that you're looking for feedback on.
Yeah, so I apologize for not looking at you and talking, but I need to look at the agreement so I can talk about it. So you'll have to stare at my head.
We can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, so OPUS had their attorney draft the agreement and they presented it to us and we've reviewed it and talked about it. And it does match the figures and those basic terms that we expected that Mike has summarized. There were a number of things that caught my eye, and I did some revising and sent a draft back, and we resolved most of those issues. I will point out 3 things to you that are a little bit unusual, I guess. And I just need to bring them to your attention and make sure that you're okay with them. So the first one is in the last sentence of section 6.2. The sentence says, notwithstanding any developer default, in no event shall the village suspend, limit, delay any payments on the developer note or seek any remedy which may have the effect of any of the foregoing. So basically, we will have some remedies against a default on the developer, but one of those remedies will not be withholding payments according to the terms of the contract. So that was an issue that jumped out at me. The second issue is in section 6.3, which says that no default under this agreement shall entitle any party to terminate, cancel, or otherwise rescind this agreement. Again, taking away significant leverage that the village would have in the event of a default of any type. In the course of the discussion, the developer's attorney agreed to put section 6.5 into the agreement. So section 6.5 allows a village termination right. It basically says if the developer fails to substantially complete the project within 3 years after obtaining a permit for vertical construction, subject to force majeure delays, or developer fails to begin grading of the property pursuant to a permit issued by the village in connection with the project within 1 year of acquiring fee title to the property, then the village may terminate the agreement by written notice to developer within 60 months. So basically what they're saying is that we're okay if we don't start within a year, and if we don't finish within 3 years, we will allow you to terminate. What they're not willing to do, though, is once they have sunk all their money into the property, they aren't willing to live with our ability to terminate in the future or to even withhold TIF funds to them. So those are the terms that they've laid out, and you know, it's you know, they basically said this is it. You know, we can't live with terms that are different than these. So we have to be comfortable that we're okay with it if we're going to go forward. You know, we've talked about it among staff. You know, I still, as a, you know, an attorney, I still have some concern that we're limiting our remedies. Most of what we want out of the developer is going to happen up front. We want the developer to redevelop the property and to create value. So our biggest concern really is the upfront. You know, once they have the building completed and it's, you know, we've issued an occupancy permit, you know, we're 90% home, or whatever you know percentage you want to give it in terms of getting what we want out of the deal. We have an improved property that has value, that will generate tax increment going forward into the future. Of course, you know, things that could happen is that they might never find a tenant, or you know, they might only find a tenant for a small portion of it, or it might get destroyed in a tornado or something like that. Their response back is, of course, if they've sunk $40 million into a building, they're going to be highly incentivized to get a tenant in there and to make it productive. And if a tornado destroys it, they'll have insurance. And you know, the market is going to, you know, demand that they do whatever they can to make the property productive so that the value is sustained going forward. And I think, you know, that is true. I think it's a good point. Of course, you know, not having, and in Mike Toth, you know, points out that we do have code remedies against, you know, ordinance violations. So if the building isn't being maintained and you know, there's weeds and there's other things going on with the property, we have, you know, property maintenance codes and ordinances and things that we can use to enforce against the property owners, independent of the leverage that we might have in withholding a payment or something like that. In all likelihood, the developer is going to probably sell off the property. And the way this agreement is drafted, they have the right to hold on to the incentive and sell the property off. And they tell me that that a buyer discounts a stream of income like that because it's an uncertainty. You know, it's tied into the increment that gets generated, and there's no guarantee that it's going to generate the increment that's been projected. And therefore, it's less valuable to them to use the incentive as part of a package of buying property. It's cleaner for them to sell the property and to hold on to the incentive. And we've kind of seen that with North Aurora Town Center, where preferred, is that where they held on to the incentive? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, we've seen that historically, that, ownership gets transferred off and the original, and the ADJOURN building was the same thing. They held on to the incentive and sold off the property. I would rather see the incentive go with the property. But the covenants do run with the land. So the covenants that are in the TIF redevelopment agreement will continue to apply to the property owner, which includes, for instance, that, unless the value deviates by 10% or more, they can't seek a tax reduction, an assessed valuation reduction. So that there are some covenants in there that do kind of protect the value of the property for the village. But those are the issues of concern. And I imagine the developer would have some things to say. I've tried to summarize a little bit of what the developer's position is, but I'm sure they probably have more to say.
I'm going to actually try to clarify this a little bit. I'm going to compare the town center to this property. So with the town center incentive with Preferred Realty, the owner of the buildings, we incentivized them to bring the UFC gym in. The incentive went with the business owner and not necessarily with the property. Okay, so once they sold off the town center recently, they get to keep that incentive. Okay, so the incentive still goes and that incentive gets paid back with sales tax revenue. The difference with this is because this is TIF increment. The money that's derived in the agreement comes from the value of the actual building and the structure, not with the business that's inside of it. So the difference would be is in the UFC gym, we were incentivizing the use. We were bringing in the gym to the town center. So the owner of the incentive didn't maybe matter. In this case, we're incentivizing the building because right now, if that tax value of that land is 0, and all of a sudden the increment goes on to a warehouse building of, let's just say $500,000, that's the increment that goes in the TIF that pays the incentive back, is that difference. So no matter who owns the building or the incentive, the building is what generates the increment to the village through the TIF incentive.
I don't know, Opus is here. I don't know if you want to add anything to the discussion.
Might as well since I'm here. Yeah, I thank you, Attorney Drundle. I know you've been working hard with our attorney and it seems like we've made significant progress and we're down to just very few items, many of which are the few of which, like the tornado example, they're unlikely scenarios but we're talking about them. So all I can say is we're the developer. There's multiple parties involved between us and our outside counsel and our inside counsel and our capital partners counsel. And we're just trying to appease everybody. But I think that we're really, really close. And I think all of the, kind of everything that's been discussed tonight, no party may rescind or cancel the agreement. I think, we need the agreement to be in effect. I think the one concern it sounds like is either a default or whatnot. If at the end of the day, if there's no tenant in there paying rent, then there's no increment being generated for us to get. So we're as motivated as anybody to have tenants in there paying rent so that the taxes are high, so we can get an increment, so the village can get an increment. In the event the building were to sell, the buyer is buying it would only sell, we're not going to sell a vacant most likely. So it typically only sells if there's a tenant in there paying rent and an investor's buying. So the investor's motivated to have a rental income stream. Otherwise their investment is not worth it. So I think, the attorneys are very, very close. And if there's any specific questions, I'm happy to try to answer them. But I know we're right on the precipice of getting this done.
I have a question for Kevin. You said the two seemingly opposite provisions. One is the right to terminate the agreement on behalf of the village. The other would be the assignability or whether, who keeps the incentive. Why would the developer need to keep the incentive and the property be discounted on a sale if there's no right to terminate by the village? If we're giving up our right to terminate, why would they need to discount it? And who cares who owns it? Why wouldn't it?
Yeah, I don't know that those two things are necessarily connected on the developer side. Other than you know, in terms of the saleability, they get more bang out of the value of the property than trying to convince someone that they're going to get a stream of income with it.
Well, they're gonna get a stream of income
Yeah.
if we have no right to terminate, right?
No, that's right, but it's dependent upon the assessed valuation, so it's not a hard number. It's something that's unknown in the future. So I think that's what would be discounted by someone who might be purchasing it. They won't want to buy the incentive, they want to buy the property.
And I can further elaborate, although it's very similar to what Attorney Grundle's saying. Some buyers, and again, I mean, this could be way after the TIF has expired. It could be after the payback's been made. But hypothetically, if we were to sell the building in 4 years and we've only recouped, say, $2 million of the 3.9, the buyer may look at that $1.9 million that's remaining to get paid and say, it's not worth $1.9 million to me. It's worth $300,000 to me, or it's worth zero. So by having it run with the land, it would sort of pigeonhole us as sellers to only selling that to buyers that not only are willing to pay a good value for the building, but also that value that $1.9 million of income for what it's worth. If it runs with the developer, then when we sell the building, we have the whole buyer pool, right? We could sell to anybody because, even if the buyer doesn't put a value on that TIF income, that's okay. Well, we have it. And we can still package that. Many times that does just gets packaged with the land anyways, because we're out of the picture at that point. Someone else now owns the building. They're the ones that are incentivized to lease it, and we're out of the picture. So here's the TIF income. That could happen. We just want to maximize our options, basically, is kind of the reason for that, because a lot of buyers won't pay you, for that. Just as Attorney Drendel said, there is some uncertainty. What if the tenant leaves, or so you get discounted?
And I don't think that really, I don't care who has the incentive. My bigger concern is what the village is giving up. And giving up all the rights to terminate or is a serious concern. It's not like I'm a private party and I can just agree on my own to risk that and agree. We represent the people of the village of North Aurora. $4 million is not an insignificant amount of money. And if the developer doesn't live up to its end of the bargain, I think the village should be able to recoup that or terminate it.
So this is a working document. What can we get maybe some more work done between the attorneys and the company and come to some type of agreement?
I think we're really, really close. I think as Mike said, just based purely on schedule, the July 19th meeting is critical to keep our schedule. We worked really hard to get the document really, really close. I think we can, over the next even week, probably finalize this to a position where Attorney Drendel and staff is very, very comfortable. I just want to make sure that everyone knows how important that July 19th date is, because if construction doesn't commence in July, we get pushed out and we can't complete the earthwork before the winter, and everything kind of just gets really, really expensive and we don't have a deal. So to us, it's just critical that we get there by the night.
We're getting down to right to the wire here. I mean, I think we can probably manage to get something worked out, right? I mean,
Yeah, we got
staff and
about a month. So
That was the purpose of tonight's meeting, was because we're down to the wire. We only had this meeting before the 19th. So we did, and Attorney Drendel has done a really good job of going back and forth, and their attorney and him have done a lot of changes that have been beneficial to us as well. And we're here because this is the only outstanding issue. It's all tied together into one outstanding issue left. So we thought it was pertinent to bring it to the board and just say, how do you feel about this issue? So we have some kind of guidance on how to get through this last part.
I agree with Mark. I agree with Mark that we need to protect our investment in this as well. So would we be able to offer like a conditional approval if we could get them to change that in the contract? If they have as much confidence and faith in the development as they're projecting, then it shouldn't be an issue. I think we need to be equitable to all sides. So I would agree with you, Mark. I think we do need to make sure that we are, because this is basically an investment of the taxpayers of the village. So I do think we need to have some protection in that regard.
Todd?
Just to be clear, and it's not going to cost the village anything until there's increment created. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, the increment will begin to be received. If we don't receive it, we have nothing to give them. So our obligation to provide 75% is to provide 75% of the new increment, the difference between what we're getting in tax now from that property and what we're going to get. So, right, so if they don't build a building, there's
anyway.
little increment maybe nothing at all.
Yeah, so we're not going to get anything out of it, and we also don't have to.
Correct.
We don't owe anything either.
That's right.
Right.
It's wholly dependent upon them.
Correct. Okay.
In the agreement as written right now, going back to it, in that section that Kevin worked with the attorney on, it does have some benchmarks. I mean, they have to have grading and permitting started within a year, otherwise we can terminate. They have to have the building built within 3 years, otherwise we can terminate. So we do have termination provisions in the first 3 years of the contract. The issue, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, the real issue is if something happens to the building after the 3rd year, that's where the protection gets lost, because once again, the money that is derived of this whole agreement comes from the increment generated from the building itself. So the building goes up once it's assessed by the township, and the assessor puts it on the tax rolls to the county. That is the dollar amount that gets paid. 75% of that goes to the developer until they're made whole. 25% of that increment goes back to the village. I think the concern would be is if a disaster had hit that building after the 3rd year and there's no building generating increment, we have an agreement that's kind of outstanding and we'd still be making payments, but I don't know at this point if that matters too much if there's not much increment being generated.
Right, what payment would there be if the building, the tornado takes it out and it's valued at zero, some land? So what's the risk, I guess?
That's the conversation I'm looking to have is
Yeah.
what is the
So like
risk?
Mark and Laura both said, they want to protect the taxpayers like we all do,
Yeah.
but what's the risk there?
Well, we're doing this to incentivize productive property that's going to generate more property taxes for the future, and improve the area. Generally speaking, we have actually that section 6.5 is pretty significant, that we can terminate if they don't start within a year and can terminate if they don't finish within 3 years. That's a big benefit to us on the front end. The concern is on the back end. So what's our risk? Well, I mean, if they build a building, we're going to get some increment. And even if if we begin giving them 75% of the increment, we're still getting 25. So we're getting 25% of whatever that increment is, which we're not getting today. The risk is, I suppose, that it's less than we hoped for. It's really nothing out of the taxpayer pockets because it's all coming out of the taxes that they pay. The risk is that 10 years down the road, maybe the project didn't go as well as anyone thought it would, and it begins to languish, and it goes into starts falling into disrepair. Maybe there was an issue with the construction, and at some point it becomes blighted and an eyesore. I'm not sure, I'm trying to anticipate possibilities. Is that likely to happen within 10 years? I mean, if it happens at all, probably not. I mean, that might be 30 years down the road, perhaps, I don't know. But that could happen either way. I'm not sure the risk is significant. It's just, having, some of our remedies taken away from us is just, uncomfortable. I think is maybe the biggest thing.
Josh, is there a way that we can like work with your attorneys and our attorney and maybe come up with something that we can mutually understand and like agree upon and then close the deal here? I mean, is it, can we work that out in the next 2 weeks or a month?
Yeah, I think we could do it in the next week. I think, as discussed, there's only an increment paid to the developer if there's a building there with rent. If the building gets demolished and, whoever owns it, which would still be us or anyone that had bought it, is why would they want to own vacant land? It wouldn't benefit anybody. It doesn't benefit anybody to buy vacant land. We're trying to monetize it by developing a successful project. So I think it's low risk, but it's something that I guess is being discussed.
Yeah, and Attorney Dreno mentioned earlier with regards to our codes, one thing I wanted to point out too, which he had mentioned already, was just an example. Every building and property is held to a certain standard, whether or not they're subject to an incentive agreement. Your grass has to be less than 8 inches tall. You have to have your building in repair. We have property maintenance codes. We have general building codes that require that. If a property is in disrepair, whether it be a fire or an act of God, other act of God, then we have remedies for that we can use through any sort of court system or code enforcement case, which we do regularly, often. So that's something that is something that we always have the power to undertake.
Just to clarify to Todd's point, the TIF, there's no revenue being generated by a building, which means there's no payback given. So I guess I'm looking for clarity in that I don't see us having much to lose. I understand having a remedy taken away, but the remedy to me seems like it's self-correcting if there's no income being generated. So I don't want to delay a developer and I don't want to delay the project. If indeed what you said is in there, that we do have the termination right within 3 years and 12 months, I'm fine with going forward and proceeding just to get this thing going, because I mean, if they're not making money, they're not going to get the TIF, and I don't see us
Carolyn?
having a loss.
Yeah, no, I agree with what Laura said. I mean, I feel like the project brings so much more than the risk. It outweighs the risk. So I would be, in favor of going forward. You seem mostly comfortable with it, just a little less than we normally get. But again, nothing's generated, nothing's being paid out. So I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, and that section 6.5, where they gave us that right to terminate if they don't start within a year, and the right to terminate if they don't finish within 3 years, was in response to this concern. So they did address it. And, they have, on the back end, once they've sunk $40 million into the building, they have significant risk.
Yes.
So I just wanted to bring it to your attention because, normally I try to, preserve those rights within a contract. In this case, it's something that the developer says they can't live with those terms on the back end, that they have to be able to count on whatever that increment is being generated once they've sunk their capital into it. But they were willing to give us the termination rights on the front end, which I do think is a pretty significant thing. So I felt like I needed to bring that to your attention.
Yeah, I agree with Laura. I think it's low risk and pretty good reward. Opus, the other properties they've developed in North Aurora, they've always been a good neighbor, and with the fence issue and different things we had with different developments, they always responded well and did what we want. So I mean, it's been a long time coming for some development there, and that TIF certainly needs a boost. So I'm for it. Anybody else?
Yes. Or I'm good.
Yeah, I'm for it. I think the TIF is almost like a motivation for them to keep the property going. So.
Right.
I'm all right.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yep. You're welcome. Okay, no exec session. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, motion adjourned.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
All right, good night. Thank you.